Joanne, welcome. Really great to see you as we've seen each other a few times over this last few months, but how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm a little inspired by that chocolatini that I just watched somebody have a great drink from.
Yeah, maybe we'll be trying one of those later. So let's get started. We entered 2020, with everyone thinking great things, I think, about the industry and about the economy. Tell us just briefly about the first couple of months before we got into the COVID world. How was Geiger doing, after a very strong, I know, 2019?
We had a great 2019, and it just rolled right into 2020. We really were so excited about the year, ahead of budget on double-digit growth. Growth both in the US and on a global basis. Heard this little issue about a supply chain problem in China, and was shoring up to make sure that we had inventories available, and were really caught unaware about this health crisis that has affected everybody on a global basis.
So you were not only Counselor Person of the Year this year, but you were also International Counselor Person of the Year a few years ago. So and you've had your pulse on the international front for a very long time. When did you start hearing that there were issues not just in the supply chain, but also potentially in Europe and then in the U.S. Related to our own economies?
I started hearing issues at the PSI show, which was, I think, the second week in January of this year, and from our Asian members, or Eastern Asian members of our international group. And that's when we had an inkling that this would be a more deep rooted problem. Had no idea, though, in January. I just did not understand the depth of the problem. It was only in the beginning of February when we realized that this would be have a significant impact on our business overall.
Yeah, I don't think any of us expected this. I mean, I was hearing the same whispers. We were together at PSI. We were all hearing the same whispers about what was going on, but imagining this. So in mid-March, and we all started facing the reality of work from home and fears of our businesses and fears of what people are going to face personally and from their own health. So how did you tackle this? You're a fairly new CEO. You've been at Geiger for 4 decades, but you're sort of in year 2, I guess, of being CEO at Geiger, having succeeded Gene Geiger when he sort of turned that reins over to you. And you're not a family member, so I'm going to have a lot of questions about that. So how did you sort of face the first few weeks of this?
We around March 1st, we decided that we were going to have all of our associates work from home, except for those in our decoration and distribution centers in London and in the US. And we already had a pretty extensive work at home program, so we had the infrastructure in place. Our IT team was amazing, working with our colleagues, and within 7 days, all associates that were in offices were at home. So we had associates home prior to the shutdown, and that was our first step. For us, we saw the impact sales-wise around March 12th, where just sales completely on a global basis started dropping quickly. We did have some lead indicators in London and in UK because of what was happening in Spain and Italy. And so we really followed what was happening there, trending, and we interpret it as it would also trend in the same way in the US.
And for all of us who lead big organizations, this was a really a test in some regards, and I think you get really an A+. I was monitoring on social media and some things you shared with me what you were doing. Sort of talk to me about how you approach this from a communications perspective first, and then secondly from a business decision process. How did you go through the business decisions, and what were those key decisions in the early days?
Well, from a communications process, we've always had on an annual basis a company meeting called a fireside chat. And it usually takes place at end of March, as close to April Fool's Day as possible, April 1. And we had to adjust and shift our fireside chat to be virtual, like this meeting. And for the first year, that fireside chat was expanded to include all of our sales partners as well as our employee associates. And so our first chat had about almost 850 attendees. And we were very transparent. I was very transparent. I was on with our executive team on exactly what was happening both in the business in 2019, as well as the impact that we anticipated in 2020. At that time in 2000, we had, from everything we had heard, and I remember it's just been a 2-week period, we were estimating sales would decline as great as 40% from April 1st through the end of the year. And so we shared that with every individual in the company. And from that meeting, thereafter, every single week, I do a video update to all sales partners, all associates. Once a month, it's a video in terms of how we're doing order counts, sales, what's going on, what significant impact or activities are we taking that's taking place in the business. The other 3 weeks, it could be anything from inspirational, what I'm seeing, shorter vignettes. And those videos continue to this day. In regards to a decision-making process, I have a fantastic executive team, and we had to make some tough decisions, and we did. We did apply for PPP monies, and in doing so, we had to keep all of our associates employed. Maybe we reduced some hours, but we kept them all employed in hopes that we would receive the funds, which we finally did. But it took about 4 or 5 weeks before we received the funds, and that held us through till the end of June.
And did that information scare people, and how did you deal with that? Announcing that you were expecting a 40% decline in revenue and sales. I mean, people start really personalizing that. What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my friends? And so many people at Geiger, like so many other suppliers and distributors in our industry, are longtime employees of many family-owned businesses where they've had really a great situation and really cared for even in difficult recessions. But we've never had a time when any of us were really facing a 40% decline in our business. So what was the emotion around that, and how did you manage through that?
It did scare people. And over the first few weeks, we saw significant declines. I think that we did actually have a week that we had a 40% decline overall. There were some pockets of our business that were down a little bit more than that. And I shared that all of the decisions that would be made as a result of it would be my decisions, and I would assume responsibility, whether they were the right or the wrong decisions. And that when the PPP funds ended on June 15th, that we would have furloughs and layoffs for individuals. So I was very transparent. We were very transparent about that. And we did have some on the 16th.
And you've been very early, in a few months ago, maybe a year ago now, acquiring a UK-based business and then doing some expansion into Europe. Did the impact hit there equally, worse, the same? And was it a good decision to buy a European-based business, a UK-based business now looking in the rearview mirror, or how are you feeling about that?
Well, looking in the rearview mirror, it wasn't a good decision. It was a great decision. And what we found was that it really was the opposite side of the same coin in the UK. So they're probably 10 days ahead of us in terms of trending. So when we were down, they were down a week or two ahead of us for the same percentages. What we did find, though, is that the UK, like we did in the US, we also were agile. I'm not going to use that pivot word because everyone's so tired of it, but we also, like everyone else, switched our supply chains so that we could sell PPE, and we bounced out pretty well as a result of that. So it's the thing that the UK helped us with, having a decoration and distribution center, is that they became an essential provider, as we are in the States. So we were able to have inventories of PPE both areas, and that really helped us with our global contracts. Long story short, right now we're down 13%. I'm fine in sharing that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We've done much better than we thought because of that. It was very difficult on a number of individuals because of some of the steps that we had to take. And it continues to be very difficult for people, for associates and salespeople.
So, have you called back most people? I mean, what's your staffing level, especially from a headquarters perspective, but also in the field, your sales force, how has that group fared, and what's the landscape there look like as we sort of start thinking about 21, which we'll get into next?
I would say that we called back about 60% of the individuals. We had two groups. We had groups that were laid off and groups that were on furlough. Of the entire group, about 60% has been called back. And we announced about a week, actually, this is October, my September update, we're at a core team now. How's it been for our salespeople? It's a varied response. I could share with you individuals who've had their best year ever. They've had a fantastic year, but there have been others that have just really struggled. So much of it depended on two factors. One was their account base, whether their account base was in distribution or in some of the areas that are up, exercise equipment, financial institutions, banking, healthcare. These individuals are having one of the best years they've ever had. Others are really struggling. But the second factor is it's been a reflection of the work that they did in the last 5 years. So that those that worked the hardest in the last 5 years are continuing to work the hardest. And we've seen a real correlation for those folks.
And as you think about the people that have been most successful, sort of what are some of the personal traits in the sales organization you've seen among those individuals? Are there some similarities about how they, go to market, how do they interact with their clients, the services they offer?
I think the number one trait is hard work. They're the ones that work. When I say hard work, I'm talking really putting in the hours and hard work and working till 8, 9, 10 at night. They did that before COVID, and they're still doing that. So that is definitely one of the personal traits that they've had. The second is that they're all optimists. They are. I was on a call yesterday, and even this morning I was on an international call, and it was really interesting to watch body language and facial expressions of those who were doing well still seemed to be very optimistic and talked about growth next year, and those that weren't were just the opposite. So that definitely was a personality trait. The third is that they had more than just relied on one key signature account, one platinum account, that they did have a good mix of business, and that's so important.
That diversification is super important. And you also have great geographic disbursement, I think, around the United States as well. Was that helpful, or was because the whole economy was sort of in the same world for at least a few weeks? And I think we've got pockets that are sort of different now. But was that helpful, having that diversity across the geography of the US and Canada?
I don't see it as a geographic location. I see it as and because this has affected the globe. Absolutely, it has global impact. And in talking to our global network, every single company has been affected. What I did notice is the common thread is they all had corporate programs or contractual large accounts. And in our company, our corporate programs are actually running ahead of last year. So that was the common denominator for sure. So you could live anywhere in the US, and it depends on where your client is situated, and your client doesn't necessarily have to be in your own backyard.
That's sort of interesting because, in so many economic downturns, the large customers, the Fortune 2000 that may be the typical corporate client, they've actually pulled back really quickly and have been, problematic early in an economic downturn. But it sounds like that's not been the case in this economy.
Absolutely not the case. They're the ones that had to invest, especially in PPE, of course, because they have to take care of their clients and their employees. But they've also had to invest in new methods to reach their clients.
Great. So as you think about 21, I've had lots of conversations with suppliers and distributors, and everyone's asking the same question. How do I budget for 2021? How do I think about what my hiring is going to be? For suppliers, it's sort of what does my inventory look like? As you're thinking about, and you're probably in budgeting like so many of us, how are you sort of thinking about 21, from a sales perspective and also sort of from a talent perspective?
Well, as I said earlier, we're at our core team. So we're actually budgeting for growth in 2021. We are budgeting much like many other companies, whether they're in this industry or not in the industry. We're expecting to be behind for the first quarter. Yeah. And we've been trending for so long at the same pace that we know that that's our baseline. But once March 12th hits, we know that we are going to be up. And we've still been blessed to have people join our company. And our activity, our pipeline for new clients is full. And so we're closing on those new clients. So we're budgeting for growth next year overall. We're budgeting, we're going to be hiring associates, and we are going to be, and I've shared this with our colleagues yesterday, we will be budgeting for a pay increase next year as well.
And did you skip a pay increase this year? So so your employees didn't get an increase this year?
We did not increase our wages this year. So our last wage increase was in 2019.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of the talent mix, you know, you've brought back many of the people, but not everyone. As you think about how you're going to be hiring maybe in the fourth quarter of the year, where are you to support that growth? And if you are hiring, sort of what's the talent mix look like, you think, going into sort of 21?
The talent mix will be different and is shifting. Where we are at this point is in our kitting area in particular, where administrative management as well as actually laborers. We are actually hiring now because kitting has increased on a multiple basis. We were reviewing our stats in terms of quotes, kitting quotes this time last year. Versus this time this year, and it's just exploded. And so we definitely have to shift talent in that area. But we also have to shift talent because of the fact that our corporate programs are growing. So that means more integrations with clients, more program managers, assistant program managers, people to handle that aspect of the business. So that's a shift in talent.
It's a huge shift. I mean, is that 10 people? Is that 20 people? Sort of what do you think that looks like in terms of that shift?
I don't have my budgets yet, Tim, in terms of how many people it will be. I could answer that question a lot better in November once I take a look at all of that.
Yeah, great. So we've got a couple of questions. One is, are you still looking for acquisitions? And if so, in Europe, UK, or elsewhere?
Yes, we're still looking for acquisitions, and in Germany, in Europe, in UK, as well as in the United States. And we are continuing it with discussions with some of the companies that we were speaking with early in the year. From that period of March through June, everything was pretty much placed on hold so that we and they could assess the situation, and we continued our discussions at this point. So I expect to have acquisitions next year on both areas. And
how are you going to value a business? You know, it's always hard to convince someone that you're the right partner for them. Not Geiger specifically, but that's always a difficult conversation because people always value themselves at X and somebody else thinks they're worth Y. But in this kind of an environment where sales for so many people are down, you know, how are you going to value companies differently than you would have in the past, or the same maybe?
Well, this is our new reality, first of all. So we have a frank conversation in terms of the business, in terms of what they see for sales, and what they look at their client base as well. So this is the reality. In fact, this is probably the bottom for all of these firms. And so when we speak with them about what is the value of the business moving forward. The good news is they, like us, will be experiencing some type of acceleration or growth. It might be faster or slower, depending on the profile of their clients. But now it's actually the time to take advantage of if they're thinking about this, whether it's Geiger or another company, it doesn't matter, because you want to take advantage of the upswing of their business.
Great. Another question from the audience. So do you think managing a business as CEO of a family-owned business was more difficult or less difficult than managing a business that would be PE-backed?
Well, I can't answer that question because I've never managed a business that's PE-backed, and I have a bias. The one thing I can say is by managing a business, a family-owned business, at least, and I would think ASI is very similar to Geiger, is that we're always looking at the long term. We are looking, it's not necessarily, and we've told our associates, this is not the year to manage the business for some sort of private equity profit. It's managing the business for the long term and for next year. So it's easier to make those decisions, at least for me, because of that. The foundation of all our decisions this past year is do what's right. And that has really helped us as a business to make some tough decisions in terms of what is right for the business, what is right for our associates.
Great. You know, one of our core values is we care. And so we were managing the same exact way, and we sort of doubled down on some longer term projects like rebuilding the ESP platform, because now's the time to stay focused, but stay on what's important, and maybe not do some of the things that are peripheral and sort of nice to have, but really stay focused on the most important things. I think that's great. One last question, which was, were you scared? Were you scared, or were you always as sure of yourself as you seem to be?
I was terrified. Not only was I terrified, one of the leadership aspects that I'd been working on this year prior to COVID was to either hold my anxieties aside and not necessarily communicate my anxieties. I think another way to say it would be to have a good poker face, and also to be encouraging. But there were some nights that were very, very difficult. Also, there were weeks that were, how can I say this? I hold my colleagues in my heart, and I know that the decisions I've made has had such a negative impact on some people, whether it was reducing hours or placing people on furlough or even laying off on certain positions. And so I have internalized and personalized a great deal of that. Just for full transparency, at the same time, I was coping with a mother who was terminally ill, and all through the summer. And I was not communicating that with my, other than maybe my very immediate colleagues. So it was very difficult for me going through this.
Well, I think times like these really show strong leadership, and you were one of the strongest. So congratulations for that. Sorry about your mother passing away.
Yeah, she did. Yeah.
And I was very touched. I'll share something with the audience that Joanne shared the Counselor Awards this year, and watched our announcement that she was Person of the Year with her mother, and sent me a video of that. So that was really incredibly moving. I'm glad you were able to share that together.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for joining us. Let's head back to Andy and Michelle.